Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Doug, for inviting me up here to speak. As he has said, I am currently the president of the Northern Illinois Civil War Roundtable, and I think this is my fourth term. Matter of fact, I was thinking of changing my name to Roosevelt from Rhyme because of being the fourth term. My talk today is about the Chicago Mercantile Battery. The Chicago Mercantile Association was inspired by the 1847 completion of the Illinois and Michigan Canal. It's a voluntary organization. It was for the purpose of handling billing of grains, large shipments of grains. It became the forerunner of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Like many other groups, when the war broke out, I'll refer to them as CMA, the Chicago Mercantile Association, was active in gathering people together to form a unit, a military unit. And they recruited in Illinois. They held two meetings at State. I don't know if many of you are familiar with the Loop in Chicago. State and Lake was the meeting place. They recruited enough members for the unit to not only form a infantry regiment, but they had enough people to form a battery, battery being 118 men. Now initially the plan was to have the battery armed with coffee mill guns. Coffee mill gun was a predecessor of a machine gun. It was like a coffee grinder. Pour bullets into it and crank it out, and it would fire much more firepower than a simple musket. But these were very rare, and they cost too much money, and it was decided to arm the battery with the standard musket, not muskets, Rodmans and smoothbore cannon. The organization was recruited, had its first meeting, and it took place, became organized over at Camp Douglas. I'm sure you've heard of Camp Douglas, but before the war, Camp Douglas was a training ground for the United States Army. Of course, it became famous in the Civil War as a prisoner of war camp for Confederate soldiers, and there's been efforts ongoing, and I believe the museum is involved with that, to restore Camp Douglas to what it was in the time of the Civil War. The unit was, they elected Mr. Charles Cooley as the first officer, the commanding officer, Captain Charles Cooley. We have a picture of him up here. The unit was sworn into the Union Army on November 8th, 1862, became part of General Morgan Smith's division. They did as I said, they did their training at Camp Douglas. Eventually, they went south to participate in the Vicksburg campaign. Now, problem with Cooley, he was a very nice-looking young man, but he was not much of an administrator. He mismanaged the supplies. Often the unit was on short rations, three-quarter rations, and there were many complaints that Cooley was stealing and selling the rations and pocketing the money. Now, as I indicated, they went south to participate in the Vicksburg campaign. They took riverboats down the Mississippi River. They were escorted by Admiral Porter's gunboats. Now, they first started artillery practice. Interesting enough that they used as a target a sunken Confederate ram, the Beauregard, which was sunk in the Mississippi by the USS Monarch, but part of it remained above the water, and the cannoneers were able to use that for target practice. The first action that they engaged in down in the Vicksburg campaign was the Battle of Chickasaw Bayou under Sherman. That unfortunately was not a successful campaign, was a disaster. The unit suffered several casualties down there, and the total Sherman's troops lost over 1,700 men in the action. Also, part of the typical battery included 3 sections of 2 guns each, with each section being led by a lieutenant, and of course the captain would be in charge of the entire unit. Part of the battery, a section under it, under Lieutenant Wilson, was active in the bombardment of Fort Hinman, and that was part of McClellan's artillery, along with Admiral Porter's gunboats. They were able to get the soldiers, the Confederates in Fort Hinman, to surrender. One of the gunners of the battery, a William Gardner, was wounded in the leg. As a result of the battle at Fort Hinman, 4,700 Confederates were taken prisoners, 17 cannons were captured, and 3,000 small arms were captured. Problems continued with Captain Cooley. The unit became somewhat of a problem. They would often engage in stealing from civilians, threatening civilians. Morale was very poor. At one point, the unit charged a pig pen and captured and ate several Confederate pigs, supplement their diet. The problems consisted with the unit, and it reached such a level that Brigadier General Allen Fuller, who was the Adjutant General of Illinois, considered disbanding the unit and distributing the members within other units. The CMA, the Chicago Mercantile Association, got wind of all the problems with the unit. They sent representatives south to see what was going on. After investigating the situation, Cooley resigned. The members of the association were able to bring supplies, clothing, and mostly food stuff, and helped increase the morale of the organization. As I said, Cooley resigned. The next commanding officer was Patrick White. 2 of the officers that did resign as a result of Cooley's mismanagement were Lieutenant James Swan and also Lieutenant David Crego, C-R-E-G-O. They were able to resign because they just couldn't tolerate Cooley's actions. After Cooley left, the next commander was Captain Pat White. White had been the first lieutenant in Taylor's battery, and he was promoted. He had been praised for his actions at Belmont, Fort Donelson, and Shiloh. Under White, discipline improved, and the unit was now in combat readiness. The next battle that they participated in was at the Battle of Port Gibson. They fought under General Logan. They defeated the Confederates. The next battle, part of the Vicksburg campaign, was at Champion Hill, May 13th, 1820 on. The battery got into a furious duel with a Confederate battery of 10 guns, the 1st Mississippi Light Battery. And during the exchange of fire, the Chicago Mercantile Battery had at present on the battlefield 2 of their 3-inch rifles, cannon, and 2 of the smoothbores. During the battle, a shot from the battery hit and killed Brigadier General Lloyd Tigeman, a Confederate general. I think we have a picture of General Tigeman here. And we have here a picture of General Tigeman. Tigeman, once the bombardment started, complained that those Union boys are trying to dirty my new uniform. Well, they did a little more than dirtying his uniform. Tigeman was bending over, sighting one of the Confederate cannons when a shell from the Chicago Mercantile battery struck him right in the chest, killing him instantly. Many historians, including Timothy Smith and Ed Beers, the late great Ed Beers, consider Champion Hill as the decisive battle in the Vicksburg campaign. During the battle, the next battle that they participated in was on May 16th, 1863, excuse me, and this is hard to pronounce, Big Black River Bridge Battle. The Confederates were trying to hold the bridge, keep the Union forces from advancing towards Vicksburg. The battle went on for a while. One of the first casualties that the unit suffered was J.A. White Jr., who was one of the gunners. He was struck in the leg, about mid-thigh, and eventually died from his injuries. Now, the battery actually charged the Confederate position at the battle, and they were very instrumental in carrying the battle. They stormed the 2nd Texas Linnet on May 22nd, 1863. At this point, the battle was a very furious battle. 5 members of the Chicago Mercantile battery won the Medal of Honor there. Let's go back there. Pat White was one of the members of the unit who was awarded the Medal of Honor. Later on, I will give you the complete list of the members of the unit who won the Medal of Honor. One of them was William Stevens. The battery continued, participated in the siege of Gettysburg, Vicksburg, excuse me, which terminated on July 3rd, 1863, with the surrender of Vicksburg. The Confederates were low on ammunition, low on food, low on morale. They had been under siege. They had been cut off from any supplies and ultimately surrendered. And of course, that's when Grant was asked for terms. Unconditional surrender was his response. And of course, that became, although his name was not, his U.S. was not unconditional surrender, but that's what he became known as. The, excuse me. After Vicksburg, the unit moved to Jackson, Mississippi. It was a very warm summer down there. There was drought. The rebels poisoned the water. They would toss turpentine into the wells, dead animals. Also, a number of the members of the battery became ill, including Pat White, the commanding officer. He had to take a leave to recuperate, and Sergeant Joseph Hyde, one of the sergeant and NCOs of the battery, died as a result of the poisoning that he suffered there. The unit was then transferred to the Department of the Gulf, part of the 13th Army Corps. At New Orleans, they served under General Banks. We have a picture of right here. We also have a picture of Lieutenant Pinckney that during White's absence while he was recovering from his illness, Lieutenant Pinckney became the commanding officer of the battery. Down in, as part of the Department of the Gulf, the unit went down to Beshara City. There was friction between men from the 13th Corps, which was part of the Mercantile Battery, and the 19th Corps. 19th Corps was, the battery members considered them to be Eastern soldiers. There was a great rivalry between Eastern and Western soldiers. It got so bad there was almost a battle between the forces of the 13th and the 19th, but fortunately cooler heads prevailed and they never came to actual combat between each other. August 6, 1863, the unit was involved in the Battle of Darien Crew. Confederate forces initially were winning the day. The Union forces were routed, but then two divisions from the 13th Corps arrived in time, saved the day, and the Rebs were defeated and driven off the field. The battery next went into a rest area, rest and recuperation at Franklin, Louisiana. There they engaged in billiards, they did some shopping in the local stores, they would buy goodies from sutlers. As you know, the rations often weren't the very best, and private sutlers would follow the army and sell often at exorbitant prices to the soldiers. They also did a lot of flirting with local women. The next stop was at McGordo Bay, Texas, also a desolate area. Again, there was a lack of forage for the horses for the battery, inadequate food. So they did what this unit had a history of doing. They confiscated foodstuffs from the sutlers. Lieutenant Pinckney was still in charge of the battery at the time. They also had acquired a mascot, a German Shepherd. The dog was very good at chasing sheep, and often the members would feast on mutton after the sheep were caught by and killed by the dog. Unfortunately for the unit, the dog disappeared, never to be seen again. Rumor had it that the dog really was a Confederate spy and went over to the Confederacy. All right, finally, Captain White returned from his illness. Shortly thereafter, he was promoted to the Chief of Artillery in General Thomas Ramson's division of the 13th Corps. The next battle that the unit participated in was Sabine Crossroads battle of April 6, 1864. They were attached, as I said, to General Ramson. Ramson was seriously wounded in the battle. Members of the battery were able to shield his body and carry him off the field to the hospital. The battery was outflanked. The infantry units that were supporting the battery were routed at the battle, and the battery was left exposed. They withdrew. They were one of the last units from the field. They managed to pull their cannons off the field, but there was a tremendous road jam, traffic jam caused by the fleeing Union soldiers, and as a result, all 6 Rodman rifles of the unit were captured by the Confederates. And there's nothing more embarrassing to a artillery unit to lose one gun, but let alone all six. At the battle, Lieutenant Joseph Barr climbed the top of one of the guns and had revolvers in each hand and kept firing at the contingents until he was killed in the battle, along with Lieutenant George Troop, was also killed. Lieutenant Cohn was captured along with 22 men. They were imprisoned at Camp Ford in Texas. They were exchanged in October of 1864. The battery then retreated to New Orleans to reorganize. Since they had lost their guns, they were given old rifled muskets, and they were, in essence, garrison troops. They were guarding trains, they were digging ditches, all the things that garrison troops would do. This did not sit well with the men of the battery. All the officers had been killed and wounded. A new officer was appointed. Captain Rowe was appointed. Lieutenant Henry Rowe was appointed to take over the unit, try to reorganize the battery. There was a lot of miscontent amongst the men. Eventually, they filed a petition urging that they be reinstated as an artillery battery. Of the 119 men in the unit, 113 filed the petition to General Reynolds. Brigadier General Richard Arnold. There was court-martials, but eventually Lieutenant Rowe was reinstated. Henry Rowe was reinstated. General Arnold reviewed the finding of the court-martial and reversed it, and Rowe was reinstated along with others who had been court-martialed. The next commander of the battery was Lieutenant William Hunt, who had been with the 17th Ohio Artillery Battery. He became charge of it. General Arnold, as I said, had exonerated Lieutenant Rowe. He was reinstated to the unit. And at this point, the United States Battery G of the U.S. Artillery gave their guns to the Chicago Mercantile Battery so that the unit would again be an artillery battery. They were converted, though, to a horse artillery with lighter guns. They, as a result, went on a couple of raids. On November 23rd, 1864, they destroyed the rebel training camp, Camp Moore, and then they cut the Mobile and Ohio Railroad, which was the purpose of that was to cut off supplies to General Hood, who was moving up into Tennessee. The unit after that returned to Baton Rouge, where they remained for the balance of the war as garrison troops. The unit returned to Chicago July 3rd, 1865 for mustering out. Very few of the original members of the battery were still left. They were very disappointed at the lack of reception from the people of Chicago when the battery returned, as opposed to many of the other units that had parades thrown for them. There was no such parade for the unit. During the war, the total casualties, suffered a total of 18 fatalities. 2 officers and 5 enlisted men were killed, and 11 others died of disease. 11 other enlisted men died of disease. And considering the amount of action that this battery saw, those are fairly light casualties, which speaks highly of the unit's ability, placement of the units during battles so that they did not suffer severe casualties. In 1906, the unit returned. The survivors returned to Vicksburg. Had a monument. Here we have a picture of the battle at Sabine Crossroads, showing the unit in action, and there was eventually 5 members of the unit received the Medal of Honor, all of them at the Battle of the Big Black River Bridge. They included, as I said, Captain White, Corporal James Dunn received the Medal of Honor, Private Charles Klotz, K-L-O-T-H, received the Medal of Honor, George Headstring, along with William Stephen and Patrick White, all received the Medal of Honor for the one battle. A number of the members of the unit went on to be very successful in life. Private John Arnold became an Illinois state senator and the U.S. Marshal. Sergeant William Brown was the founder of the American Shipbuilding Company, very successful in business. Private John Cutting became a U.S. representative from California. All right. For further reading, I would suggest the Chicago Battery Boys by Richard Williams, which is still in print. And also like to thank Charles Banks for helping me with the presentation.